Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We've all been eagerly looking forward to this session, and I'm delighted to bring this to you together with She Breaks the Law. Joining me this evening as my co-host is Priya Lele, who is the Legal Operations Lead for Client Solutions at Herbert Smith Freehills, and also the co-founder of She Breaks the Law. So for the past 16 years that I've been in the firm, Pride Month, celebrating Pride Month, is not something that we really spoke about. But in the last year and a half, since the launch of Arise, which is our D&I platform, we have tried to have some conversations, spread more awareness around diversity, inclusion, allyship, and also try to understand the members of the LGBTQ community and what they really need. So as part of our efforts this year, we are very honored to have with us to share her story, Kunoor Chopra, who is the co-founder and VP of Elevate Services. Joining her this evening as our moderator is partner Tanu Banerjee. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Priya to talk a little more about our collaboration and also welcome our speakers. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you very much, Priyanka, for that, and really, I'm delighted to be here. Very briefly about me, as Priyanka said, I am a co-founder of She Breaks the Law, and also for my day job at Legal Ops and Client Solutions Lead at Herbert Smith Freehills. I'm based in London, but like majority of you joining us today, I was born and brought up in India. A little bit about myself in the sense that I'm a corporate finance lawyer, but I moved away from practicing law and into what I call innovating and disrupting the practice of law almost a decade ago. About She Breaks the Law and our fantastic collaboration with Khaitan and Company. For those of you who may be new to She Breaks the Law, we are a global network of women leaders and change makers, or hashtag law breakers as we like to call ourselves. We're all passionate about the power of innovation and collaboration. And our mission is to accelerate transformation and create a more progressive, inclusive, and collaborative legal ecosystem. We support and empower women of all backgrounds and disciplines within the legal ecosystem in their strive for change. We were launched on International Women's Day 2019, and we're now already a thriving community of thousands of women from 55 countries. So it gives me immense pleasure to say that we are very, very glad to be collaborating with Khaitan and Company for our India chapter this year, because they share our values and vision, and they're also very passionate about creating a supportive, respectful and inclusive culture, not only within the firm, but also wider in the legal industry. As part of our collaboration, we bring together a number of amazing initiatives and events, including a series of intimate and interactive sessions, our Chai Pe Charchas, as we call them, that happen once in every 2 months, including there's one, I think, next week on legal tech in India. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm really, really proud. Could I be more proud, by the way, with my pride colors? To be co-presenting this, Pride Month special event, where we are really, really fortunate to have our amazing lawbreaker, Kunoor Chopra, joining us all the way from Los Angeles, California. Well, what can I say about Kunoor? I could read out her professional bio, a short one, but I can already say that it doesn't do justice to what she does. But anyway, here I go. So I'm going to read it out. Kunoor is a co-founder and VP of Legal Services at Elevate. She builds the legal services offerings that are part of Elevate's portfolio of solutions, including in litigation, contracts, compliance, and intellectual property. He works closely with customers to understand their enterprise challenges and brings the right suite of technology, services, and consulting to meet their needs. She designed right-sourced solutions focused on combining people, process, and technology and data in innovative ways that enable customers to modernize and optimize operations. Throughout her career, Kunoor has spearheaded the transformation of the legal industry by creating platforms that provide effective and efficient options to obtain, manage, and perform legal services. She's been instrumental in transforming the legal industry from her days at the forefront of early days of legal process outsourcing to help build One Elevate. Kunoor is a licensed California attorney and previously practiced as a general litigator at another firm before founding her own process outsourcing company, LawScribe, in 2004, and of course, Elevate since then. Like I said, that doesn't actually do justice to her amazing professional career. But the way I would really describe Kunoor is that she's not only a very successful American lawyer of Indian origin and entrepreneur, but she is a huge champion of diversity and equity and is an inspirational speaker on these issues. sharing her own experience openly and generously, and supporting and encouraging others to find their voice to make this more equitable and better world. So that's why we are very, very proud to have Kunoor join us today from Los Angeles. And last but not least, Tanu. For those of you who don't know Tanu, she recently joined Khaitan and Company as a partner in the TMT and corporate commercial practice. After graduating from Symbiosis Law School in 2008, oh my God, Tanu, you're really young. Sorry, she started her professional career with Reliance and the ADA Group, and then moved to private practice at a few other law firms in India. With around 13 years of experience, Tanu specializes in media, technology, and corporate and commercial laws, and works closely with technology and media companies. Over to you, Tanu, to kick off our fireside chat with our fabulous Kunoor.
Thank you so much, Priya, and so great that we are doing this with you. And Kunoor, welcome again. Before I start off on our chat, I must add that I've been personally so inspired by your journey, by also where Elevate is today and the kind of services that are happening. Me being part of the media and technology practice and working with so many media and tech companies here, I'm increasingly hearing about Elevate here in India as well. And it's definitely very inspiring. But on that note, to start this off, it would be great if you could share a little bit about yourself for those of us who don't know as much, just in terms of how you got to be a lawyer, how did the private practice side go, and from there, how did you sort of jump onto the journey of building such a successful business enterprise?
Of course, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Tanu and Priya, for that fabulous introduction. And I have to say, when you all reached out to me to speak today, the fact that you have Arise, the fact that you are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that we're having this discussion is so impressive. And so thank you to Khaitan and Company for doing this, and to all of you, obviously for the collaboration, but for doing this. So I'm very, very excited to be here. So a little bit about myself. Personally, as you mentioned, I was born and I'm based in Los Angeles, or close to Los Angeles. I was born and raised out here. My parents are from Delhi, so they moved out here in 1971, and I was born shortly thereafter. And but a very kind of Indian traditional family. My dad brought 5 of his 7 siblings from India to the U.S. My grandparents were out here, so spent a lot of time with them. So although I'm born out here, I feel very, very connected to India and to my culture. I have my 1 brother, sister-in-law, a nephew, and a niece. And I'm married to Deanna Fulton, and she and I got married on 11/12/13, so that I never forget our anniversary date. But that is the year that gay marriage actually became legal in California. We have 2 dogs and cats, and as I mentioned, we live close to Los Angeles in a place called Palm Springs, which is desert, and in Laguna Beach, which is the ocean, so we kind of like a little mix of both. We're both very close to our families. My family lives in LA, and Deanna's lives near Palm Springs. So professionally, I've had a very interesting journey, and everyone's journey is different, and will definitely be defined by your network, your family, social environment. And so I'd say throughout all of it, what I've learned is that if you're true to yourself, success will follow. So when I look at kind of my journey, it really hasn't been linear from law school to Elevate. Undergrad and law school were more linear, and then really everything went off track. So yeah, how did I make the decision to become a lawyer? And so that's kind of funny, but when I was at UCLA for my undergrad, I actually did not know what I wanted to do. But my parents were traditional South Asian Indian parents, said, hey, you can be a lawyer, doctor, or engineer. And I thought, okay, I'm right. Right? So definitely afraid of schools, so didn't want to be a doctor. I had no idea what engineering was about. So I'm like, okay, I can take anything in undergrad and go to law school. So went to law school at Loyola in Los Angeles, had a fabulous experience. One thing really stands out to me was one of my ethics professor, her advice to me, she said, Kunoor, when you graduate, do not take the first paying job. Make sure you find something that you like and you're interested in. I did not follow her advice, and I took the first paying job. It actually worked out. I went to a firm called Nossaman in Los Angeles. Great cultural fit. I was getting a lot of great experience, going to trial, going, for hearings. I wasn't just sitting doing document review. And culturally, politically, it was a good fit. They were a democratic firm, so more open, more progressive. But I thought that bigger was better. That's what I was taught in my Indian culture. And so I applied to a firm called Fulbright and Jaworski, which is now Norton Rose Fulbright. Great firm, but for me, just wasn't a good cultural fit. Much more conservative. And there were a couple other things going on there, which and I don't know if you hear about, they talk about the 5-year itch. So when you're a 5th-year attorney, you're really like, what do I really want to do? And so I was going through that. And aside from the kind of the fit part of it, one of the things I was like, okay, if I stay here, at that time, there weren't a lot of options, career options if you're an attorney. So if you were in a firm, you either became an equity partner, you brought in business, or you left. It's very different now. You look at companies like ours, technology companies, law firms, in-house, there's so many different options, but it was very limited back then. And so the thought of having become a partner, bring in business, sell the billable hour was not appealing to me. I was very scared of sales. And then the other piece was I saw a lot of inefficiency in how legal was being done. And first was with respect to some of our customers, I saw that, we were charging them $400 or $500 an hour for work that I was doing as a junior associate, which made no sense. I was like, why are we charging that for document review? And then I saw this law firm, right? Large law firm based in Los Angeles, of course, probably had offices all over the world on expensive real estate, and they're operating finance and accounting and word processing in this expensive real estate. And I thought there has to be a better way to do this. So I decided that I wanted to go a different route. And, I wanted to stay in the legal industry and utilize the skill sets. I passed the California bar. It was very, I was proud of what I'd accomplished. I just didn't want to practice law anymore in this firm environment. So I went to talk to my parents, and my mom was horrified. She said, how could you leave a firm, right? You're successful, you're making, at that time, $150,000 a year, which was, a big deal. And so she was like, no, I don't want you to leave. And my dad, though, was more understanding. He's actually an engineer, but turned entrepreneur. He runs a successful clothing business in the US. And so he said, okay, well, let's talk about this. BPO and ITO are very popular right now out of India. Outsourcing out of India is really taking hold. Why don't you do something illegal? So I took a risk. I left big law and I went to India. Well, my dad with his company had offices in India. So I went there, I put an ad in the paper, and I had 168 people apply for a job. And at that time, what I did was I was starting a company to provide word processing, so more administrative work. But once I got there and I reviewed these resumes and started just meeting people, I was getting lawyers applying for this job because, they're like, wow, working with international customers, sounds exciting, sounds different. So we got a lot of great talent. So really evolved into providing legal services, so support services, litigation, contracts, and IP. So as this entrepreneur then, so I've left law and I've kind of entered this entrepreneurial business route. And so, as I mentioned, I started, really one of the pioneer outsourcing companies, LawScribe. And what was funny about kind of that part of my journey is, as I mentioned, when I was practicing, I was deathly afraid of sales. But in my company, we were pioneer in the industry. LPO was not a term. I was the CEO. We were really creating a brand new industry. So I had to be the face of the company. And so I had to do sales. So I started to create a network. So when I was doing that at LawScribe, I don't have a business background, and I wish I had spent that one extra year to get my MBA. But so I didn't have a business background, doing this on my own, family funded, so my family was supporting me. And I was making fabulous connections. And so I remember one of my customers from a big company said, Kunoor, I love you. I would love to send business your way, but we need a big company to work with. I need a bigger platform. So I had to make the decision at that point, do I, get private equity? I really didn't understand that world, but do I get it? Do I expand my business or do I sell? And so again, being just kind of new to this whole thing, I decided, okay, let me sell my company. So I sold it to United Lex, and great company, but when I was there, I really missed building a business. I was able to bring in customers and do sales, which was fabulous, but there's still a piece of what I enjoyed that was missing. So 2012, fast forward to kind of where I am today, 2012, I met Liam Brown, reached out to him. I didn't know him, he was based in LA, and I sent a LinkedIn and I said, hey, let's meet up. I'd love to know what you're up to. He immediately responded. we had lunch, and we really, at the end of that lunch, realized we had the same vision of where we thought the industry could go. There was a lot more change to be had, even though there were competitive companies that existed. And we wanted to build a very customer service focused company, really understanding what their needs were. So I decided at that lunch that I wanted to do it all over again and start this company with him. So basically at Elevate, my role is to, when I started the company, I was building out the account management program. I built out the legal services side of our house. So the work we do under litigation, contracts, M&A, compliance, IP. And now ironically, I focus on sales. So I work with our law departments and law firms, bringing our solutions to them. And we'll talk about it more, but one of the things that I've been able to do at Elevate was to make sure that I built a company where people could bring their whole selves to work. And that has been, absolutely amazing for me.
Fantastic. That's so inspiring. And just, Kunoor, like you spoke, you started off in practice, you worked with different firms, and, sort of then decided to jump out of private practice and then grow into a business, etc. And obviously you have, Indian parents, Indian origin, you understand, the traditions and the mindset here. In terms of your personal life, did any of, your personal background influence the decisions that you took along the way, in terms of, maybe switching firms, leaving practice, getting into business, growing a business, any of that, any of your personal life sort of influence any of those decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I shared kind of this professional journey, right? And so there was a personal journey that was really a part of all of that. So it really started, with kind of coming out to my family and really what impact that has had. So I actually came out to my parents. I came out to myself. When I was 15 and a half, my parents read a letter between me and my girlfriend at the time and said, "Hey, is she your lover?" And I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't know I was gay. That wasn't what was resonating with me, but I was like, okay, I'm different. And I like this girl. And so, when I was in undergrad, when I went to UCLA, that's when I started to really understand, what being gay was. I started meeting people and talking to people. And I started to really stand up for myself. I said, yeah, I am, I'm a lesbian. I was telling my parents, I was very strong in terms of wanting to stand up for who I was. My parents were not happy about it. There was a lot of conflict. And I think I pushed it, I guess, so much to a point where in my second year at college, my parents disowned me. And so, of course, as Indian parents, they were paying for my school, right? They were paying for my, where I was living close to UCLA. So now I had no funds. They took everything away from me. And so, and let me just pause for a second and say everything is fabulous with my parents today. And, it was a journey for them. They had just come from India. It's difficult. And a lot of that was they didn't want their child to have a difficult life, but, they didn't know how to process that. And so disowned me. Luckily, I had an uncle who was gay, and he lived in West Hollywood, which was close to Los Angeles. It was like the gayer part of LA. So I lived with him on his couch for 4 to 6 months, and but ultimately my parents felt bad, started paying again for my school, and I went back. I finished UCLA in 4 years still, and then I got loans to go to law school. So, it's interesting because my parents, although they're very accepting of my wife and I now, we go on vacations, we do that, do a lot of things together, they still aren't supportive. And what I mean by that is it's still hard for them to say, I don't think today they would ever say my daughter's a lesbian, or, they acknowledge that we're together, but they don't actively talk about it, which I think would help them in kind of their journey through this. So I'd say the way that this impacted my professional life was college was great, law school was great, I could be completely out. I was also fortunate. I lived in Los Angeles. I live in LA. It's, I think people probably in Delhi or Gurgaon are probably a little bit more fortunate than in some of the suburbs, right? Went to the two law firms. I could be out, even though Fulbright was a little bit more conservative. I was out. But what was interesting is that you would think when I started to run LawScribe, right? My company, I'm the CEO, I'm the president, I could be whoever I want. And I couldn't. In the US, I was out. But because of my experience with my family disowning me and not feeling that acceptance from the Indian community, I decided not to be out to my colleagues in India. And most of my company was in India. So I never told them. And then when I sold to United Lex, I didn't tell them either because it was a more conservative company. So I was nervous. And mind you, I mean, this is 2010, so not that long ago. And but then when I came to Elevate, it was interesting because Liam and I were talking, and I was talking about my partner in the they word. So they do this, they do that. I was playing the pronoun game, right? I wasn't saying she. And then he says, so what does she do? And all of a sudden, like this load was like lifted off my shoulders. And I thought, wow, I can be me. And this is 9 years ago, so not a long time ago.
Yeah.
And after that, I knew at that moment I was going to build this company, and I was going to build a customer service focused company, and a company where people could bring their whole selves to work, because I knew how challenging it was over my career, and I wanted to give people a different experience.
Great. Lucky for you, you had a gay uncle that you could back on at the time. Okay, great. So in terms of coming out, when you did finally come out, and I know you said that it's not, it wasn't too long back. But how is, and obviously you went through challenges with your parents and with your family, but how is it with your colleagues, with your friends? Were they supportive? Were there things when you look back and you think that maybe they could have done this differently, or was it perfect? How is that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I think that my early days were actually really good. I ended up at good firms. As at Fulbright, it was more conservative, so nothing ever happened there. But I didn't feel like I could completely be myself, and that's what when we talk about DEI and B, right, belonging. I didn't feel like I belonged, and so that was part of the reasons. Like I said, it wasn't a good fit for me. And then at when I sold my company and I went to United Lex, and again, there's nothing about the company. I wasn't out because I was nervous being a more conservative firm. So those were my own, that was my mindset of my perception of how a conservative company would respond. And so, but after I went there, I started to tell people, and I remember there was one executive in the company, and he was talking to somebody else, and like, oh, can you believe Kunoor's with a girl? But it was in a very like sexist, like negative type of way. And I was like, wow, this is definitely not somewhere I want to be. And again, nothing about the company, but it was a specific person. But again, it was just part of my realizing this wasn't the environment that I wanted to be in. Elevate, everything's been great. Again, I've been really a champion to help others. One story is interesting that stands out at Elevate to me, though, it's kind of related, is and when as part of Pride Month, kind of like you guys, we changed our logo to the Pride colors. And so one of my colleagues, and it was automatic, so it automatically did it for everyone at Elevate. And so one of my colleagues from Poland reached out to our CEO and said, I'm a little uncomfortable about that. And the reason wasn't because she didn't support LGBTQ plus rights, but she lives in a country where it's not as accepting as in the US, right? And so she asked if it could be something that was voluntary, because she felt if other people saw it, like outside of our company, they may have a negative reaction. And so it made me realize at that point that, we can't come to this topic with an American-centric view. I mean, it's very different here than it is in India, right? But we can help people, help individuals, help companies on their journey, and there's different ways to do that. But I think that's really just important to remember through these types of initiatives.
Right. And what is the sort of things once you did start Elevate, and you're talking to us about how you've made the environment so inclusive, and you also work with other people now to help different organizations in their journeys. What are the things that at the forefront you sort of implemented at Elevate, which sort of kickstarted this whole process?
Yeah. So first of all, as I mentioned, I think I made a very conscious decision early on to be out and to talk about it. And that journey was, and what a journey even at Elevate wasn't easy. I remember the first few days after I started, I went to India and we were setting up a new customer. And what was cool is the customer was there, and he was a gay man, and he was very out. And I looked at him and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. This guy's in India and he can be out. And there were a couple other people who were founders of the company who were in India, and Liam had told them about me. And so they were like asking me about my wife, or my partner at the time. about her, and I was like, wow, I could be myself, and I can be out in India. So I think the first thing was to make a very conscious decision to be out, even if I felt uncomfortable, because again, it was going to be a journey for me at that time, 9 years ago. And so I made sure that I was telling people, and I was very open about it. And that, again, related to wanting to give people that opportunity. What was interesting is as we were building Elevate, right, Liam and I, very, very open, very focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, a few years in, first few years we're building the company, a few years in, we look at our numbers and we're like, wow, our numbers aren't where we want them to be, especially in the more senior ranks, you know, in terms of gender diversity, more equity, equitable, you know, women, men at the more senior ranks, more ethnic people at the more senior ranks. And so we knew we needed to make a more conscious decision to increase diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And so one of the things immediately we did was to hold ourselves accountable. We published our equitability and inclusion report, which I've seen you guys have done, right? Let's put our numbers out there. Let's post it on our website. And then we know, like, hey, year on year, we're going to do something to improve that. So you can go to our website today and you can take a look at it. Diversity, the importance about building a diverse environment is to make sure that you're hiring diverse. But how many of us, when you're hiring, you go to the market and you're like, wait, you know, we need to hire quickly. Customer needs work done. We have all these new clients coming in. We don't have the time. And so the candidates that you're going to get are not going to be as diverse as you want them to be. So you have to have a mindset shift to make sure that you're taking the time that you need, but also changing the pipeline that you're pulling from. And so there's, at least in the US, there's many recruiters who will help source for diverse candidates. So making sure you change that pipeline as opposed to just saying, well, we don't have enough time in the pipeline coming in is just not diverse. Inclusivity, making sure that diverse people are feeling included, right? They say that diversity is inviting someone to the dance, inclusion is asking them to dance, right? So making sure that people feel included, that you're inviting them to opportunities at your firm, right? Making sure that you're including them in hearings or in customer meetings, taking them to trial, promoting them, right? Having programs to help develop and promote people. And then belonging. Belonging is, again, how do they actually, as I mentioned before, I didn't feel like there was a place for me, like I belonged. Get involved in organizations where people can, you know, also get involved if they're in organizations of interest to them. Form employee resource groups. We have various employee resource groups for disability, for Black associates, for LGBTQ. So making sure you kind of create these groups where people actually can feel like they have a safe space. So, but again, I think the most important thing for me personally has been to be that spokesperson, to let people know that they can reach out to me, and to know that, hey, they can look like me, they can be like me in terms of LGBTQ+, and that they can have a really difficult journey, and it all works out, you know?
Fantastic. A lot of homework for us in general in India, I think. But, you know, talking about just individuals, you know, who are part of the LGBTQ community, and given that you know, work with so many of them, you know, from your observation, what do you think is the most, you know, challenging part, or what are the challenges that, you know, people in the community face in general, you know, be it, let's say, just, you know, giving their 100% to work, versus coming out open to friends and colleagues. And like you said, you know, you need to start with coming out to yourself, right? You said that in the beginning. I think just putting all of that together, what do you think is the most challenging part that individuals face, and you know, any tips that they could work with?
Absolutely. I think, look, if you look just generally, people are, LGBTQ people are, and sometimes we fear this, if we're, depending on where we are in the US, right? Fear of being hurt or antagonized. So there's kind of that physical fear that people will feel. And honestly, when I'm in India, like, I'm much more careful when I'm on the streets. Like, I won't hold my wife's hand. You know, I've been very, very careful because I know what that environment is. So just that fear, right? That general fear. And then I think a lot of us, you know, it's hard to separate the personal from the professional. And so it's very difficult to bring your full self to work if you can't be yourself. So and so you have that conflict, right? But as an LGBTQ person, you have that fear of, well, if I come out, then I have that fear of being disowned, so you don't do anything. And then I think it impacts your entire life. Fear of not being accepted by your family, maybe even a fear of, hey, I can't be out, so I'm never going to find somebody that I'm with because I can't be honest about it and find someone because I'm afraid. But so you get stuck, and so you kind of live this life of being alone. And so that really just, I think, connects into the professional, right? Not being accepted. So there's a family piece, but like for me, the family, I projected it into the workspace, and I didn't tell people about myself because I was afraid of not being accepted by my colleagues, by my culture, right? I mean, that's very, very significant. I'm being bullied at work. If someone comes out at work, what if their colleagues don't respond well to it, right? And they make fun of them. How do you prevent that? Not being promoted. What if I come out as a lesbian and my manager doesn't like that and they don't promote me or help, invite me to do a trial or meet with customers? So all of that then results into, not being able to perform effectively and not bringing your whole self to work. So, and I can only imagine, like I said, even when I come to India, I'm nervous about walking on the street, holding my wife's hand because, just it was a couple of years ago that Section 377 was finally repealed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a journey out there in India, and it's a very different journey.
Right.
Yeah.
And okay, and in terms of let's also talk about you did touch upon those are the kind of things that somebody in the community would think and preempt, right? But how much of it, because you've been through that journey of coming out, working with colleagues, being out in the open, and being so accepting of everybody else and yourself, how much of it is a misconception? I would if I could put it like that. Some of it may be just notions in your head. Maybe if I come out, people will react that way. But it may be misconceptions, right? They may not be, but they may also be misconceptions, and vice versa. For people who are around people of the LGBTQ community, what are perhaps unconsciously, some misconceptions that we may carry. And how do we identify those misconceptions, those biases, and how do we communicate effectively with our friends and colleagues?
Yeah, absolutely, and they are misconceptions, and often, and it's interesting because it's important to educate people. But when I was younger, one of the things that I struggled with was if I felt someone asked a question or was different than I was, either I didn't want to be friends with them or talk to them because I didn't want to deal with the conflict, or if they said something, I became defensive, right? And so angry about it. And I just did a roundtable with my company today, and we spoke about this topic. And so, what we were all talking about was that what's important is that first, don't be defensive and really listen and understand people, because sometimes it is a misconception and they just don't know, and they are just being curious. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes it may not sound as great. And so one, I would say, is listen to what somebody is saying. And then if someone says, well, being gay is a choice, or gay people can be converted, or gay people are going to be as successful, say, okay, well, what is that based on, right? Have the conversation, be willing to have that conversation. And 99% of the time, there will be no basis for their misconception about how gay people are, right? And so I think that's really important, is be willing to have that conversation in kind of a more zen or a more calm way, because often it's just, people just don't understand. People don't understand. I remember my wife, often she'll talk to people who she'll meet someone out at a restaurant, at a bar, and they'll have this completely opposing view. They may be politically from a very different party. And so for me, I would be like, oh, I just want to walk away from that. I don't want to be a part of that. And she's like, wait, but the point is they need to be educated. And so she will have the conversation and she will relate to them and she will connect to them. And at the end of that, they'll be like, oh, wow, you're just like me. I've never met, a lesbian, and wow, you really changed my perception. And so I think that's really important, is to have the conversation and be willing to educate.
Great, fantastic. I think, you make such an important point that, all of us need to learn from each other in terms of how to communicate, educate each other in communication, and be just overall accepting. In terms of the journey now, Kunoor, we've spoken about the challenges, and we've spoken about how people are dealing with misconceptions, what we could do better, what organizations could do better. But in terms of, once you do come out and once you're, you really sort of, I'm sure you feel a certain amount of freedom. What's the most joyful part about it? To be able to be 100% who you are without a bias, or without fearing that, other people carry a bias about you, which they may or may not. But what's the best part about being out?
The best part about it is being able to talk about my wife, is being able to share pictures of my wife and my family with my colleagues. I mean, it's something, I mean, it's funny because it's something so simple, right? It's something we all take for granted. But the fact that I can do that and I can be who I am and I can post pictures on Facebook and my colleagues in India can see what I'm doing, with my family, like that's very, very significant. And I mean, I can't even, you can't truly understand, not being, imagine if you couldn't talk about your family, right? So something so significant. And that, like I said, everything really plays into then being able to be successful, whether it's in your personal life or in your professional life. When you can bring all of you, I mean, you will be successful. And I think the other joyful thing, I think now is really just being able to be there for other people and to create that environment. I'm not saying it's perfect because I don't know any LGBTQ people from my India office, and I wonder why, because I'm hoping I'm creating that type of an environment. So that continues to be very, very important to me, is to, and there have been a couple of folks who have reached out to me. So that's joyful, right? Is to know that I'm having an impact, and then for people to reach out and say, hey, thank you.
Okay, that's fantastic. And through this journey, Kunoor, about yourself, and I'm sure you've seen journeys of other people who speak to you or who you've helped out. Do you think there's really, any discrimination that really happened that people face, or did you face any discrimination through your journey, in the past or now? Of course, now you're very successful, and so I'm sure people look at you differently. But along the way, just about yourself or other people.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think we do in different ways. And as I mentioned, I think personally, I've been very lucky to live where I do. And for the most part, my family have been, and my parents have had, I think, a more difficult time. But my uncles, my cousins have been fabulous. My sister-in-law, who's from India, when I told her I was gay, she was like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." So for the most part, I think I've been fortunate with family and friends. But yeah, I mean, I think that when I walk out in the street, like I said, in India or in certain parts of the world, I have to be very, very careful because not everyone is accepting. But yet, I also have to be willing to educate people. And I think that what's important as a company will be to keep having these conversations, to have the ERG groups, to kind of create that safe space so that people can kind of come out of their corners, right, and not really feel like they're going to be discriminated against. And at Fulbright, I don't know. I mean, maybe people looked at me differently, which is why I didn't feel as open being myself. When I was at Nostman, like I felt everyone was accepting. And so yeah, I mean, I think there's different, I'd say micro discriminations that I've experienced that I think people are afraid of, and we just have to create a very different environment for them.
Right. And so would you have, with that discrimination of you, unconscious discrimination that you may have felt, did that in any way, or let me rephrase that, if, let's say, in the absence of that, would you have stayed at Fulbright in any case?
No, at Fulbright, I mean, that was a part of it, but it was kind of the rest of the journey, right? Really not wanting to do sales or, so a lot of inefficiency. So for me, at that company, no, it was not important. But when I went to United Lex, it was a bigger part for me because I was kind of evolving in my journey, and I was like, wait, I want to be in a place where I can be who I am, right?
Great. That's really wonderful. Just, my last question here, and then we'll, take some Q&As from the audience here. What will be your general advice to friends and colleagues who are possibly struggling with this at the moment? In terms of your experience, what's just your anything that you could share
Absolutely.
additionally.
Absolutely. Look, I think the most important thing is to find somebody to talk to. You are not alone. And for me, like that was very significant, right? When I was at UCLA, I sought out an LGBTQ group. When I was, my parents disowned me. I had my gay uncle. So having that network, having people that you can talk to is important. And if you and they don't have to be LGBTQ, maybe they're a really good friend of yours, right? Someone who you can talk to on being who you are. But making sure you do that outreach. There's groups, and I can share resources afterwards. There's actually LGBTQ plus groups in India. And so it was interesting when I was first coming out, I had reached out to, and I'll talk about in a second, I found kind of these resources sorry, I just get so nervous like talking about this because it's such a significant topic for me. But that was just so significant, was to have people to reach out to. So I'll give people resources they can reach out to. I know it's scary, right? And you have to also give yourself the patience. Like everyone's going to be on their own timeline. You have to work through your own terms and journey of being out. But it is so important to come out and to be able to be who you are. So in addition to LGBTQ organizations, there's also attorney-related ones. So I'm actually the co-chair of the South Asian Bar Association's LGBTQ plus chapter. And with them, I actually did a session this week on intersectionality and solidarity. And so it was great. As part of that was, we went and educated other South Asian attorneys because they actually wanted to learn about this. So it's great that we have LGBTQ plus organizations. There's actually attorney ones. And last night I was looking it up, and there's actually attorney organizations in India. So I can give that resource as well to you that you can share with people. So talk to people you trust. And look, I know that in the South Asian community, it is so difficult because of our families, and we don't want to disappoint them, right? I never, ever thought my parents would accept me, never. And now my wife and I go on vacations with them, right? So it does get better. And, one of the things is, and this gets me very emotional, but, when I was coming out, when I was in America, America is very different, right? And so I was accepted, as I mentioned, by the firms here. When I was at school, like they had the group, but there was still that Indian part of me. And I was like, wait, are there other Indians like me? And that may be a question people ask, right? And so that's when I talk about reaching out to resources that, yes, there are. And so I actually, and here's a book, and I can put this in it's called Lotus of Another Color.
Oh.
It was written by a gay man, Rakesh Ratty, and it's about his experience. There's beautiful, beautiful poetry in it. And I've been reading this because there's one poem, and I get so nervous about it. So I may get emotional, but I wanted to read this to you guys, and
Absolutely.
I will get emotional. But so he wrote this poem, and if you read it, I think it captures, what we go through as, again, being LGBTQ by itself is challenging, right? And how do you work through that? But being Indian, being South Asian, it's a whole different thing. So, okay, I'm gonna try this. So it's called Beta. So it's called Beta, and that automatically just gets me. So mommy keeps her jewels in a box full of dreams, dreams that will be realized in the echoes of my screams. Father waits for the day I bring a crimson bride. Yet if I sit on a white horse, it'll be an empty ride. Every chapter of my life written by their hands. If I now reach for the pen, will they understand? Should I listen to my heart and wrestle with this guilt? Should I lock myself inside the walls they would build? I want to fill their eyes with joy, yet let my spirit run wild. How can I find the love I seek and still remain their child? So very, very powerful. And I think that just makes me realize, like, hey, kind of the conflict that we go through. So, but it does get better.
Fantastic. I really, really appreciate Kunoor, and more power to you. More power to all of our colleagues in the LGBTQ community. I'll move over to the Q&A. We have some questions in the chat box, and maybe it'll be good to have Priya back.
Oh
Hi, Priya.
my God.
Good to
Hi.
Yeah, it's so fantastic.
every time I hear you speak, it's just, it's just fascinating. I mean, I've heard you speak and I've interviewed you so many times, but honestly, I still get goosebumps and it is so touching. And thank you so much for reading that poem and for being vulnerable and for, sharing that vulnerability. I think that is so important. So yeah, huge, power to you. You're a fantastic role model. And I must admit, I didn't take your permission, but I've been tweeting live some of the things that you've been sharing today.
Of
So I
course.
hope you don't mind that. But it was just so powerful. And for the first time, I had a luxury of just listening in as opposed to being involved in the conversation. So I thought, let me make the most of it. So I'm just going to, to basically ask if there are any questions coming through in the chat function. But in the meanwhile, I just wanted to say fantastic thank you again so much for sharing your story so candidly, being so authentic. And, I'm sure a lot of what you said resonated with all of us. Whether we are from the LGBTQ community, whether we are allies, or whether we are waiting to come out or otherwise, it's just fantastic, especially can relate to the fact of sort of not letting your family down or, struggling with your emotions in terms of, how do you, the conflict, the internal conflict that one goes through. But in terms of, organizational things as well, thank you so much for sharing, how do you start this journey? How do you make a culture more inclusive? Because it's not a tick box. It's not a, this is Pride Month, hey, I'm wearing a Pride t-shirt, I'm, doing an event. It's not that. It's really culture and some of the things you said about creating a safe space. And I love, I'm going to use the B. I love that. I'm going to steal it from you. It's not just DEI, but it's actually B as well. So when you include people, they have to, and I think that's the sort of further step, isn't it? Because inclusivity is, like you said, inviting people to dance, not just to the party. But B is a step further, which is that the people who've been invited to the party and to the dance floor belong there, feel that they belong there. So it is definitely that next step. And I love the way you phrased it, and I love the way you described it in terms of how you create that, and something around the sort of importance of creating the support groups, importance of sharing resources, importance of having these sort of conversations. And I absolutely agree with you. It's just keep on talking about it. It's normalize it. It's not as I said, not just around Pride Month or once a year or something of a tick box, but it's having that continuous dialogue. So not related to LGBTQ community, but something we did recently, which is to do with race diversity. And so again, very similar themes, but something that we've started doing at our firm is this open dialogues. And they started at the back of the George Floyd death last year, but actually it wasn't a one-off. We continued to do that. We still continue to do that. And now it's become like so for example, this month, because of the Pride Month, we then opened it up to Black and other racial LGBTQ members. And what does that mean? Like you said, it's that intersectionality.
Absolutely.
It's hard enough being of a different ethnic origin in a country which is, dominated by one ethnicity. And it's even harder if you are a woman, or if you are disabled, or if you are LGBTQ member, or if you, those sort of things. So it's really, really fascinating to hear that. Thank you very much for sharing that. Unfortunately, I can't really see the chat function for some reason. It's probably not working for me. So I don't know.
Coming in.
It's you want to read out a question? Thank you.
Yeah. Hi.
Before we, sorry, Sukanya, I just want to add that, before we go to the questions, I think, Kunoor, it was also really interesting, to note that the South Asian community that Kunoor spoke about, even though, she's in the US, and of course, US is a slightly different place than India at the moment. But the fact that, there is a bias in the community even there, right? And I'm sure, it will sort of influence and inspire a lot of people here who are listening to us.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And on that I've got a really interesting question, actually, so apologies to interrupt, but I think we should definitely let Chinmayanand to come off mute and speak and ask his question himself, please.
Yes, absolutely.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Chopra. Thank you, Ms. Banerjee. Thank you, Ms. Lily, for having this event. Suddenly, I'm put on the spot, so I have my question written. So, Ms. Chopra, you'd mentioned, I mean, from what I understand, throughout your professional life, it was really important for you to sort of make sure that wherever you were, you didn't have to sort of sacrifice who you are, or sort of not speak about, not let people know about who you are, or not that be that not important in your profession. Okay, my question is the sort of cultural fit that you saw, that you sort of did consider in all of wherever you had worked. How important would you say it is for us today who are entering? I'm a law student in India. How important it is? I'm sorry for not introducing myself earlier. How important it is, would you say, today for us young professionals to have this cultural fit consideration that you had done, to do, like, because honestly, we cannot really, when we're entering the profession, afford to do that. Just getting a good job is the only consideration we can think about. So in that sort of line of, I know this is a really broad question. Anything you could add on this, that would be great. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. And so it's tough. I mean, throughout my career, as I mentioned, I mean, I was nervous at different points about being out. And it is until like today that I really feel like I'm completely myself. And I just wasn't aware of it, right? I mean, I came out, you know, a long time ago, and we didn't have these types of discussions. I didn't have someone having this discussion for me as I was going into the legal profession. Otherwise, I would have been more mindful of it. So one is having the awareness today now for you is like, okay, at least going into an interview, talking to them, asking them about, well, what's your DE&I program, right? What are you doing around that? Do you have certain groups? Like, so really kind of fleshing out some questions around that. But I think, you know, going back to what you said, you're saying, hey, wait, what if I'm a newer attorney and I just don't feel that I have a lot of those options? And so what do I do? So I still think you need to go in, you know, ask the right questions in the interview, and you may end up in a place that, you know, kind of you go, and it may be about educating people. So again, not everyone who doesn't understand this will always be that way. So maybe you kind of generally check the firm. Maybe there's some people that you like. You go in or to a company, get a sense check, and try talking to people. Try trying to be out, have the discussions, start the groups, right? But if you still feel it's not the right place, I would say leave. Like, you know, all the money in the world, all this, it just isn't worth it. I mean, you know, it was very challenging for me through my career to not be able to be who I am. And now it's like the most amazing thing, but I understand it's a journey. That being said, it's a very different environment today. I don't know if you work at Ketan and Company, but sounds to me like, you know, as Mr. Ketan said in his newsletter, D&I is in their DNA, right? So I think you have more options now to find companies like this, like Ketan, to look at in-house options, or you join a company like Elevate, right? Companies like Elevate, there's so many other options out there for you. So I understand at the beginning of your career it is more challenging, but ask the questions, be aware, and then make the right choices for yourself.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
And we've got Ravi Kulkarni as well, who would want to ask a question. Ravi? Minesh, can we unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Kunoor and Tanu, thank you very much for this. Is very, very exciting webinar. See, I come, Kunoor, perhaps from a generation which was, I'm a grandfather, so you just try to imagine. I come from a time when I had to fight for getting a woman partner in my old firm with my partners. So it is from that generation. So I lost a very good a top class lawyer because we couldn't make her a partner, and then thereafter I managed, and this was way back in historical times, 2013. No, not 2013. What I'm talking of, 1997 or so. So, and then now, last 16 years with Ketan and Company, and I must compliment both Sukanya and Priyanka for taking this initiative. This is very, very close to my heart for many reasons. One is that I have a niece who is Kunoor, just like you, who's married with her partner in Australia, and she came out to us way back in 2019. Again, I can't remember, but way back when she was 18 years old. She's now almost 50, so she's there. She's also had a child through, in Australia. It is possible through a donor that her boy is 10 years old, a beautiful, lovely boy. We are in touch with it. So having been part of that journey and having been associated, this has been amazing. And I must again compliment both Sukanya and Priyanka. And Tanu, you asked the most relevant questions, because when initially Kunoor was telling us about her progression, and then you brought her back to the topic and pinned her down, and she made absolutely, and that was excellent. So my compliments to all of you. I just wanted to say this.
Thank you, Ravi sir.
Thank you, sir.
Ravi, thank you so much for sharing that. And that, people ask, first of all, that got me very emotional. But, when people ask, what can we do, right? What can we do as allies to support our LGBTQ family, friends, colleagues? One of it is telling these types of stories for your colleagues to know, hey, you have a lesbian granddaughter and she's successful and she's married and she's happy and she has a kid and you love, your grandkid. Those are the stories that people need to hear, because then they realize this is normal. This is not something that is so different than who we are. So thank you so much for that.
No, I tell this to wherever it is. She's not my granddaughter, but my niece actually. And
Sorry, your niece.
Yeah, my niece. My granddaughter is just 6, so I don't know what she's going to turn out to be.
Yeah,
but fortunately, she's in London, so she's a completely different atmosphere and completely different area. But that's how it is. So when started this Pride Month initiative in our firm, I was personally very, very. I've not told Sukanya or Priyanka about my personal involvement in this, but today I could not resist. I've told them. I think Priyanka knows, so because Priyanka is her parents-in-law knows very well. So they have met this girl and they have met so we know all this. So that's not the issue. Sorry about this personal sharing, but I think this is important for all the people in the firm who are listening today to the webinar. And this will also go, Sukanya, this is going to the posterity for in your recording when you, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Wonderful. I've taken too much of your time, so please continue.
I love that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi sir. Priyanka, we have a few more questions on the chat box that I could see. Could we, quickly take up a couple of them? One of the questions that I can see, Kunoor, is someone's asking, do you face any challenges dealing with your clients? And I think that's very relevant, because we did speak about colleagues and family and friends. But I guess your experience as a practicing lawyer with clients may be very relevant.
Yeah. I think I've been fortunate in terms of where I live. So most of my clients have been accepting, and I remember, so I haven't had an issue. It was more of just the general, like whether I was going to be out or not. So if I was not out at the firm, then I wasn't really talking about it. But I remember at Elevate, Liam and I were talking, and he said if there was ever a client who came and had an issue with, you being gay or the people kind of being who they are, he's like, I would fire the client. And so, and it, I think there comes a point where you can actually, you feel comfortable saying something like that. But, I think that's important to realize, especially, with people in your firm, like, and I hope kind of, people get that support. So I personally haven't felt any negativity from my clients. And I also have a company that would support me if there was ever a client who had, any kind of negative reaction or anything negative to say.
That is such an important thing to share, Kunoor. I think I can totally relate to that. I've heard a very similar story from another person in the She Breaks the Law community, in that she had both experiences. One where the partner did stand up, just ignored, and she's not at that firm anymore. Not going to name her or the firm. And then another where she joined another firm, had a very similar experience where the partners stood up. And clearly she's not just stuck at the firm, she's a partner there. So that speaks volumes, I think, about, and this is what we're talking about, creating a safe space for your employees, not only within the organization, but how you present yourself to the outside world, including your clients. You've got to stand up to bullying. There is no excuse whether you're a client or not.
Absolutely. You know, we have privilege in different ways, right? We all have a different privilege, whether it's, hey, I'm a heterosexual woman, and here's, you know, I have friends who are LGBTQ. It's, you know, standing up for them and making those statements. So I always say, if you see something, say something. You know, stand for something.
Fantastic.
Would you like to take one last question, Priya, Tanu? I mean, we could ask Kunoor, and then maybe Priya, if you have any
Sure,
closing.
absolutely. Priya, could you see the chat box? Do you want to take up?
For some reason, it's not working for me, so I'm not able to see that. If someone of you just wants to ask the final question, apologies. It's very small screen.
No problem. I think I've you know, there are a couple of questions, but maybe what I think may be most relevant right now. Kunoor, what are your thoughts on you know, how do you choose between diversity, inclusion, and merit in terms of hiring? You know, and I'm sure you have experience. You know, you have volumes of experience there in terms of building the whole organization and getting the right team in place, and at the same time working towards diversity and inclusion.
Yeah. I mean, look, merit goes without saying, and that's what's interesting is when you talk to people and they're like, you know, like, okay, I want diverse candidates and so, and they're like, well, you know, you make sure that you're not going to sacrifice quality and you know, the background of the person you're getting. That's going to be important. I mean, that goes without saying. You want to make sure, yeah, if we're hiring for a specific role, we want to make sure that person is going to be the best person for that role, and we want to make sure that we are interviewing and meeting enough people with diverse backgrounds for that role. And so kind of making that extra effort is important because those diverse candidates aren't just coming into that pipeline automatically. And so, yeah, so I think merit's very, very important. It's just making sure that we're opening up the pipeline of people that we're talking to about it.
If I could just add to that, Kunoor, I agree. I think it boils down to your pipeline. And I think I find these questions really puzzling and sometimes offensive because it goes to the fact that you don't have the right pipeline. There are always going to be candidates who come from diverse backgrounds and who are very capable. It's just about having the right culture and creating the right environment so that you're attracting the right pipeline. Quality is absolutely given. I don't think anybody's ever going to hire anybody if they're not suitable for the role. It's just when you are doing that, if you have a diverse pipeline, you're bound to choose, you know, people who come from different backgrounds. And it's not just the diversity of, you know, backgrounds, but it's also the diversity of thought that brings. I think that is very enriching. Sorry, I'm conscious of the time. I've got to rush for another meeting. So I don't know about others, but I was just gonna again thank Kunoor a lot. And thank you to Sukanya, Priyanka, Tanu, everybody for organizing this. We've been delighted, as I said, to collaborate with Khaitan and Company for our India chapter, and we're so proud to bring this fantastic webinar together. And Kunoor, thank you so much for getting up so early and spending this amazing hour and a bit with us. Inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Everyone.
everyone. Take care.
Many
Thank you so much.
takeaways from yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Kunoor. Bye.
Bye.